Students, welcome to my lecture. I am Punjaka Rathi, Assistant Professor in IMS Engineering College, Ghaziabad. There is a lecture of monopoly, the features, the price determination, the output determination and the price discrimination we will be talking about in this particular lecture. This is a topic in unit number 4. In the earlier lecture, we have talked about the pricing and output determination under the perfect competition. This is a very prominent topic in your syllabus and it is very important to know how the price and output is being determined by the sellers in different market structures. So, moving ahead, first let us discuss what is monopoly. So, monopoly, as the name suggests, mono means one, poly means number. When the number of seller is only one in the market. Earlier we have talked about that there are very large number of sellers in the market. So, there are two extreme points, one is the perfect competition and second is the monopoly. In the perfect competition, there are very large number of sellers. In the monopoly, there is only one seller. It means these two things are at extreme points of each other. It means whatever the features of perfect competition were, now the features of monopoly are opposite to that. So, if we know what are the features of perfect competition, we can predict what can be the features of the monopoly. Let us discuss, and I want you to be like you are in the same stage that you are able to know what is the next feature of the monopoly. So, mono means one. So, it is a kind of market structure where there is only one seller. It is a market setting in which a single seller is selling the product which has no close substitute. It means he is the seller is the only participant who is selling and producing the goods or services. This type of industry belongs to monopoly. If we see in today's time, if we see there are some industries left in the monopoly which are under the control of Government of India. For example, there is aviation, there is distribution, there are the public utilities, there is the production, earlier it was the production of the energy was in the monopoly, but nowadays it is not in monopoly, the private players have entered into that. Earlier telecommunications was in monopoly, where the BSNL and MTNL were there, they were the government companies which were providing that kind of services. But because of the changes in the scenario, changes in the policies of the government, they are now being not in the monopoly. So, that time when they were the only seller, we can say they were the industries were monopolized by the single seller. So, as we have said, it lies at the extreme point from the perfect competition, or it is the extreme opposite of the perfect competition. Up here the firm produces the entire supply of a particular good or service that has no close substitute. It means that, what does it mean? That the seller and the industry, the firm and the industry, both the things are similar. In the earlier class we have seen that perfect competition, there is firm, there is industry. Firm belongs to industry, that was like the number of sellers they were supplying, the total supply was the total supply of the industry. But here the supply of seller is equal to supply of the industry, the demand of seller is equals to demand of the industry. So, as we have said, single seller and large number of buyers are there. Product, how the product is? It is unique. Unique means it has no close substitute. We have to remember the point, students, that it is having no close substitute, but it does not mean that it is having no substitute. It means there are substitutes available, but the substitutes are not the closer ones. There are barriers to entry and exit. Because there are barriers to entry and exit, that is why it can be the reason of monopoly created in the industry, that The barriers to entry and exit can be in the form of legal restrictions, it can be in the form of control over the supply of raw material, there can be patents, there can be copyrights, there can be some efficiency of the producer that nobody is able to compete with that efficiency and enter into the industry. There is imperfect knowledge, it means the sellers and buyers they do not have, there is single seller, but the buyers they do not have the perfect knowledge of the market. There is inelastic demand curve, the demand curve is inelastic, it means it is not perfectly inelastic, it is elastic, but less than 1, the elasticity is less than 1. Seller is a price maker because he is the only player in the market, he can easily decide what should be the price of my product. If I am only the seller in the market, I can easily decide, I can control, I can change my price. So, that is why it is said seller is a price taker. Generally, it is asked why seller is called as a price maker, he is not a price taker because he can decide the price. There is immobility of factors of production. If we say immobility, immobility means the factors of production are being controlled by somebody, by some player in the industry, that is why no new player can purchase them, can employ them, and that is why new players maybe they are not able to enter into such industry. There is huge government intervention in the form of legal restrictions, legal and government restrictions are there, that is why no player is able to enter. Earlier into the telecommunication there were the legal restrictions that government was not allowing anybody to enter into that. Into banking earlier there was legal restriction, but when the legal restriction has changed, now the industry is not into monopoly. No difference between firm and industry, they both are same thing. The types of monopoly. When we say types, the types depend on the cause. What is the reason of creating the monopoly? Why the firm is able to create the monopoly depend on the type. So, there are legal restrictions because of the laws, because there are some acts, laws, there are some policies which are imposing conditions that no new player can enter into the industry. If this kind of legal restriction is there, we will say this kind of, we will say it is legal monopoly. This type of monopoly is called as legal monopoly. If some player is having control over key raw material, then we will say it is natural monopoly, sorry, it is raw material monopoly, or we will say material monopoly. When there is efficiency is the factor. Efficiency means that the already existing player is having so low cost of production that it is able to produce the product at so low cost that no new players can produce the same product with same features at such low cost, and the new player would not be able to survive at such low cost, average cost, then it means there is efficiency, there is economy of scale, economy of scope available to the player because of the technical efficiency, because of the cost efficiency, because of the market efficiency, no new player is able to enter. That is why we can say that there is efficiency, and this efficiency is kind of hindrance to the existing player and he cannot able to enter the industry, and such kind of monopoly is called as natural monopoly. Such kind of monopoly is called as natural monopoly. So, now we come to know that there are three kinds of monopoly: legal, material and natural monopoly. Now, let us discuss the demand curve, because to understand the price and output determination we should know what is the shape and how the shape of demand curve of a monopolist seller. There are some important points to remember, that the demand curve is sloping downwards, because we have already said that the demand is inelastic, but it is not perfectly inelastic, that is why it is having negative slope, it is falling downwards. It means that when the demand curve is falling downward, it means that if the demand curve is this falling downward, it means seller can reduce the price seller can reduce the price, and if he reduces the price, he can sell more quantity to the consumer, because here he can exploit the advantage of reducing the prices. He can raise the price, he can increase the price and still retain customers. Why? Because there is no close substitute of the product available, there is no other seller selling the product. Demand curve of firm and industry are same. This demand curve belongs to firm as well as it belongs to industry. This we have discussed. AR curve is demand curve. So, this demand curve is also equals to the AR curve, average revenue curve of the seller. When AR curve is falling downward, MR curve would also be falling downward, which this we have already discussed in the previous lecture when we were talking about the relationship between AR and MR. When AR is falling, MR would also be falling, but the slope, the rate of fall in MR would be higher than the rate of fall of AR. So, slope of MR curve is twice of AR curve. This is from the relationship between AR and elasticity of demand. Now, to understand what kind of profits would be there can be three kinds of situation under shorten. Now, let us revise. What is shorten? Shorten is the situation where seller can only increase or decrease the output up to the extent the availability of the variable factors of production. So, it depends on the variable factors of production, he can only adjust his output, but he cannot increase the scale of the operation, he cannot increase the, he cannot set up a new plant, he cannot enter into mergers, joint ventures or diversifications. So, that is why it is called as the shorten. So, the supply can be changed, it can be increased or decreased, but there cannot be shift in the supply of the seller. So, in this situation there can be three kind of profits, there can be three situations for the seller, it can be economic profit, normal profit or it can be economic losses. This we have discussed in the previous class, that how we are saying that it is profit or it is loss. So, moving ahead, under the shorten, how the seller finds out the price in the shorten. So, what we have discussed, let us, as I have said, there is only one curve, there is only one curve. Why? Because seller and industry both are same. So, we need not to plot industry curve and the firm curve separately, it is same thing. So, it is the seller as well as the industry. Here is the quantity of product, here is the price, here is the average revenue or revenue, and here is the cost on this axis we are taking. As we have said, how the demand curve is? Demand curve is falling downward and demand is equals to what? Demand is equals to average revenue of the seller. And how would be the marginal revenue of the seller? It will also be falling downward, and the slope of MR is greater than the slope of AR, it is twice of AR. So, it will be equals to the MR. Suppose, now if suppose the seller is having this much average cost, if it is the average cost of the seller and it is the marginal cost of the seller. So, how the seller will identify his optimum output? Optimum output matlab where is the maximum profit. So, what is the rule? Find out a point where MR is equals to MC. So, where is the point? MR and MC are intersecting at a point E. Drawing a ordinate to x axis will get a point OQ. So, what is the optimum quantity determined here? It is equals to OQ. Now, at what price he should sell? He should sell, this is the demand curve. So, this quantity he will be able to sell at a price, at this price OP. So, he is able to sell at a price OP. If we denote the point, this point by M and N. So, now let us compare what kind of profits are there. To find out the profits, we need to compare the average revenue and average cost. What is the average revenue? Average revenue I am denoting by this green line, it is equals to MQ. What is the average cost? average cost I am denoting by this blue line. This is the cost curve. So, this is the average cost, this much is the average cost, NQ is the average cost. Which one is greater? Revenue is greater. When revenue is greater, what kind of profits are there? There are supernormal profits or economic profit. Now, if I ask you what is the profit? So, what is the formula to calculate profit? Profit is equals to, it is very simple, profit is equals to average revenue minus average cost. This is the profit per unit. If we multiply it by the quantity sold, it will be equals to the total profit. So, this is the if I denote this profit by a pink color. So, this is the profit per unit. So, what is the total profit? Total profit will be equals to AR minus AC, which is equals to MN, and how much is the quantity sold? OQ. MN into OQ means length into breadth. It means the area of this rectangle would be the profit area for the seller. So, this much is the profit for the seller under the shorten when he is having supernormal profit. Now, the question is, does the seller has supernormal profit in every situation? A monopolist is having only profits? No, it depends on his cost and the revenue structure. So, let us discuss that. How it differs? It depends on his profit. As I have said, it depends on his cost. So, if his average cost is lower than the average revenue, he will be having supernormal losses. If average cost is equals to average revenue, there will be only economic profits. So, on what factor it depends? It depends on the cost and revenue conditions. It depends on the threat from the potential competitors. If there is a threat of potential competitors entering into the market, then the revenues would be changing, and then there may be chances of losses. What kind of changes in the government policies are being proposed? That is also a kind of threat to the monopolist seller. So, monopolist seller is generally having supernormal profit because it is the only seller in the industry, but it is not necessary that it is having only profits. It may have profits, it may have losses, or it may have economic profits in the short run. Well, let us reach to long run situation, how the long run would be. So, because we have said that it is the only seller and it has all the chances to improve the volume of production, it can increase the scale of production, it can set up new plant, it can set new offices, it can diversify, it can go into new markets and increase the supply. And when the supply would be increased, what will happen? The large volume of production would lead to lower per unit cost. So, average cost of production in the long run would be decreased when it is starting new plants, or it is starting new factories or new offices. So, long run average cost will be lower than the short run average cost, and when the average cost is reducing, it means the profit margin of the seller would be increasing. In the long run, that seller would have only and only supernormal profit. It means that if a seller is having losses in the short run as well, he can have profits in the long run. Why? Because he can improve, he can increase his scale of operations, and he can reduce his per unit cost, and that is why he can get the profits in the long run. So, how it works? If we denote that on a graph, how it look like? Again, here is the price, the revenue and the cost. Here is the quantity, it was a short run average cost. When he has started new plant, his short run average cost for second plant has reduced. So, the long run average cost, in the long run the average cost would be enveloping the short run average cost. This we have discussed in unit number 3. Students, you have to refer that point from unit number 3. So, this will be the long run average cost, which is lower than the short run average cost. Okay. And suppose it is the long run marginal cost. I have denoted two things, long run average cost and long run marginal cost. Now, if it was the demand curve, average revenue was this, it was the marginal revenue of the seller, and it is the marginal revenue which is lying below the average revenue. So, optimum output would be determined at the point where marginal cost and marginal revenue are intersecting. So, that point E, draw the ordinate from E to x axis will give the optimum output for the seller. Now, if we see this optimum output, if we compare what is the average cost? Average cost, this is the average revenue and this is the average, this much is the average cost if we denote by this M and this by N. So, what is the average revenue in the long run? Average revenue is equals to MQ. What is the average cost? Average cost is equals to NQ. And what is the profit per unit? Profit per unit will be equals to NQ into quantity sold. And what is the quantity sold? OQ. So, this we can depict here graphically as well, that what is this? This is the profit per unit. Earlier how much were the profit? Earlier if we see, that was the curve from, if it was having only one plant, earlier he was selling this quantity only, this much quantity he was selling at this price, and he was having this only smaller area of, he was having this much profits. But when he has increased, when he has set up new plants and he has reduced his average cost, his profit area has increased. This is the benefit of diversification or starting new plant in the long run for the monopolist seller. So, monopolist seller has only and only he is having only profits, he is having only profits in the long run. So, if the question is asked in examination, students, if it is asked what kind of profits are there for a monopolist seller in the long run. So, you will answer there are only supernormal profits or economic profit, and why it happens? Because in the long run seller can reduce his average cost, and that is why he can increase his profit area, and that is why he will have only profits in the long run, in spite of the fact that he was having losses in the short run. Then monopolist seller also uses a policy which is called as price discrimination policy. Price discrimination policy is used by maybe monopolist, it can also be used by oligopoly, in the oligopoly as well. It is not necessary that it can be used only in monopoly, but here we are discussing this policy under the monopoly. So, price discrimination means that the producer is charging different prices for different consumers for the same goods and services. The producer is having different kind of consumers, he has divided the market into different segments, maybe on the basis of the type of the consumer, on the basis of the timing in which they are buying the product, on the basis of the gender of the consumer, on the basis of location where they reside in North India or in South India, or they are charging different prices for the same product. It means the cost of production for the seller is same for that product, but it is charging different prices to have more profits from that kind of sellers. When it is possible? When the seller is able to distinguish the market into different segments, and when there are the price elasticity of the product is different in different markets. So, we have said price is same, but charging different prices, the cost is same. For example, doctors charge different fee for different customers, or for example, we have different cinema ticket, the price of cinema tickets at weekend is different, weekdays it is different. In railways, the ticket price is different for children and different for adults, different for senior citizens. So, this is how the prices are being discriminated on the basis of the customer, on the basis of the consumer. What is the necessary condition for price discrimination? First condition is that different markets must be separable. Second condition is that the elasticity of demand must be separate in different markets, otherwise they would not able to charge different prices. For example, if there is elasticity is low in one market, he can there increase the price. If it is high in another market, here he can decrease the price to get the advantage. There must be imperfect competition in the market. The profit maximizing output must be larger than the quantity demand in a single market or a section of consumer. So, if these conditions are fulfilled, then only the seller would be able to employ this policy of price discrimination. This price discrimination is being used by sellers by 3 degrees. There are three degrees, or we can say there are 3 types of price discrimination on the basis of the technique which he is employing. So, first degree is when the seller is able to charge a different price to each of its customer. It is only possible when there are only a limited number of customers. If a seller is having only a selected set of customers and he know that at what price this customer number 1 is going to purchase my product, at what price customer number 2 is going to purchase my product, it means it is a kind of negotiable price. He is charging that price to that consumer for which he is agreeing to purchase the product. This is the first degree, very simple kind of price discrimination, but it is only possible in kind or in market where there are only a few customers. So, the price is charged on the basis of the willingness to pay, how much the buyer is willing to pay for the product, called as the reservation price. Then the second degree, under the second degree, the seller is charging different price for different quantities of the same goods or service. So, it means here he has made some blocks of the consumers. He has divided the consumers maybe into segments, rich, poor, or into middle income group, and then he is charging different prices to these different set of consumers which are in the block. So, there the level has increased. Earlier he was charging a price to say on the basis of the customer needs. Here he is charging a price depending on the target group of a particular population. So, this is called as block pricing method. Third degree is when the firm segments the customer into groups with separate needs. So, he has segmented the groups with separate needs, and this is called as the third degree. He charges different prices from different groups. So, as we have reached to the last slide, let us recall or revise in a few sentences what we have discussed today in class. We have talked about the monopoly, we have talked about the distinct features of the monopoly market. We have also discussed about the price and output determination under monopoly in the short run and in the long run. So, what we have concluded here, that in the short run seller can have 3 kinds of profits: supernormal profits, supernormal losses, or normal profits, but in the long run seller would have only the supernormal profits. Okay. So, this we have discussed, and we have also talked about the price discrimination, where seller is charging different prices for the same product which are produced at the same cost of production to different set of consumers, maybe in different markets or maybe at different timings. So, with these words I would like to sign off. Stay happy, stay safe, and have a great learning. Thank you.